We are back in the black hole of real estate, and there has been a lot of talk way back in the beginning of the year, and then in August, and even now about these buyer-broker agreements and how they work, and can a buyer absolutely represent themselves, and how do the agents help in that situation? And this is your host, Ron Wysakarski, for the black hole of real estate. And so today, I want to talk about the gray areas, if you will, on this topic. It's supposed to be black and white. So let me ungray some of the gray that maybe some of you are experiencing. It is true, and it's always been true, that a buyer can represent themselves in the purchase of a property. A licensed agent can represent themselves in the purchase of a property. So none of that's changed. Now, access points are a little different, and the advice that we may or may not be giving has also changed. I want to give you some scenarios of what I've been experiencing recently in the real estate field that gave me enough concern, to make some phone calls and to check with some of the legal experts to see, what it is that we can be doing in this situation to help ourselves, but also to keep ourselves out of the proverbial hot water tank over here. So, the first thing is, if you are a realtor and you are the listing agent, you can absolutely open up a door for any buyer, give them the information sheet from the MLS that's public knowledge and in compliance, and then you can silently observe while they tour the home. You can answer questions that are on the MLS sheet. So if they ask the square footage, or if it has, sewer, septic, and the year it was built, things like that, you can absolutely do it. If the seller has a disclosure and you want to print it and give that to the buyer, you could absolutely do that. All of those things are okay. So you can let the buyer in, let them tour, and give them public information and information that's pertinent to the listing. Not a problem there. Now, if this buyer chooses to make an offer on the property, this is where you can no longer help unless you have a buyer-broker agreement in place. So everything up to this line you can do with nothing in place. But if they say, I'd like to make an offer, they have to find a way to write it up themselves. You cannot pull out an offer and fill in the blanks, because the minute you start asking about what would you like to offer, now you're providing a real estate service. And in the utmost of care, I've read, I believe, and I've been advised that that's really where representation begins, because now you are discussing an offer by asking them what numbers they want to fill in the blank. So that is absolutely crossing a line for me anyways. So if you are a buyer and you want to look inside of multiple properties and you want to call the listing agents and you don't want to fill out any paperwork or sign any buyer brokerage agreements, then you would need to provide yourself the opportunity to get the offer written up however you choose to do that. Along with that, you could sign a one-day agreement or a one-month agreement or a single property agreement, or there's multiple documents. There's not just one buyer brokerage agreement that's approved. So if you wanted to just sign up for just that one property, have they just show you that, and then you could fill out the compensation, because it's negotiable, right down to 0 or up to 100%. So there you go. So you can negotiate that with the listing agent for them to tour the home if you want help as far as real estate services are concerned to fill out the offer. At no point can the listing agent compromise themselves by sharing any of the property owner's secrets, if you will, or private information, or how they feel about price and terms, because you have a representation agreement already in place where you have a fiduciary responsibility to the home seller. So if you've got the listing, nothing has changed. You still have that same responsibility. If the buyer decides that they want representation on some level based on the terms that you agree upon, then you are, at least in Florida, a transaction broker notice is in place now, and you treat each party fairly and not share any secrets that you're not authorized to share. We'll keep that as simple as possible. So we've walked you through the scenario that as a listing agent, you could absolutely open up the door, let people walk through the property, and provide, basic information as I described to anybody. So that's in place. Now, where it starts to get a little interesting is, let's say there's a licensed agent and they live in another area. And if you're friends or not friends, it doesn't matter. But let's just say there's a licensed agent in another area and they want to say, listen, I would like for you to help me out. Well, the same rules apply, even though they're a licensed agent. And they could absolutely write their own offer. So that is a little simpler. Now, where it gets interesting is, let's suppose that your licensed agent friend lives in another area of the state or out of state, and they've asked you to help out with a property that's not your listing. You have nothing in place that allows you to represent the seller to open up a door, and you have nothing in place as a buyer's agent that allows you to be in compliance and open up a door. Now you're really walking the legal tightrope, and where I'm leaning is on, in the abundance of caution, the seller hasn't authorized me to be there. The buyer hasn't authorized me, to represent anybody. So I am completely neutral as far as opening up the door over here. I cannot provide information to that buyer with regard to price or terms because I don't have a right to do that because I would provide a real estate service to them with nothing that says I can do that. I suppose that you can have them fill out a brokerage agreement, a buyer agreement, and put the compensation at zero. Then you would have the right to do it and just agree. You're agreeing to work for nothing, so you can do that. So that piece of paper, crazy as it sounds, would need to be in place for you to help them. Now let's take it even a step further than that. Let's suppose that you have a home buyer who has purchased a home without representation, and you're working in property management side, and you want to get them rental comps. So if you just give them rental comps and they're already under contract, you're okay. Because they're already under contract, there's no representation, it's a separate service, and there's nothing in the settlement that says that you can't do it. But if they're a buyer who's in the process of purchasing this investment property and they're looking for advice on what to rent it for, then you've got to be super careful if it gets into a conversation about how does that rent affect the price, because now you're providing some real estate services. Or let's suppose that same buyer asks you to open up the door, meet them at the property. Again, you don't represent the buyer, you don't represent the seller, and you're in there getting rental comps, which could help them form an opinion of what to offer. You're really putting yourself in a position where you could unknowingly, make an error. And we're givers, we're kind people, but this is an area where we really, really, as agents need to be careful and make sure that we're not stepping over a line that can get us in hot water. I mean, let's face it, these lawsuits, they happen for a reason. And the courts felt that there was something wrong going on, so they had a big settlement. And that's why there's all this paperwork in place. I would ask everybody, to the real estate community, to provide an abundance of caution, protect your own license, but also do no harm to your clients. No matter how you feel about this, whether you want to call it over the top or red tape or making things hard, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but the rules are in place and they're super clear. If you're an agent, you have resources. I know state of Florida has a legal hotline. You can't share the information, but you can call it. And you can also talk to your broker. If they're unsure, I suppose you can call together with your broker and get a clarification. If you're unsure, or chances are this session is going to lead to other questions for you. What I want to make sure that we provide right now is a solid service, and sometimes just a gentle reminder that it's different than it was. And there's absolutely times where it feels harder because everything is more compliant and there's extra paperwork to fill out, and it's just different. It's a change. We're not used to doing it that way. And I'm not unsure that what we're asked to do today is necessarily different. There's a lot more tracking compliance of it for sure.
I think things might have been a little bit different. And, I'm not the attorney here. I'm just the one trying to live in the world, that we're all in right now, because we're all new agents in this market, so to speak, and we're all working through these things. If you're a buyer or a seller, just understand that we're all working in a situation that's quite different. If you're a seller and, curious about open houses, or, well, just let them in, there's some rules in place that we have to abide by. And if you're a buyer who just wants to call the sign and ask the listing agent to open up the door, that's okay. Just understand there's certain things that they can't answer for you or advise you on because of the rules that are in place. And they do have that fiduciary responsibility to the seller that they do represent. Listen, it's a different place to be in. It feels a bit heavy when you're going through it. But in all honesty, as we're talking about this today, what I would tell you is this. These are things that I'm reading and interpreting on scenarios that have been put in front of me, not necessarily things that I've actually had to go out and do, but as I coach and consult other agents, I hear these scenarios, and I felt this was an important topic to reach back and to make some phone calls and share my opinion on what I've interpreted so far. I would tell you this. I am not your attorney. I'm not your broker. I'm not your buyer's agent or your seller's agent today. I'm just one person who is trying to do some research for the benefit of others, and I hope that's the way that you take this today. If you have questions, ask your agent. Your agent has resources to get clarifications, either through their broker or the legal hotline. That's the path to go. And if you're going it on your own, you're allowed to hire an attorney. If you would prefer to have an attorney represent you as opposed to a real estate agent, there's a lot of ways that you can do this without having representation. So I hope this clears up a few things today. Chances are it created some new questions, and I would invite you to drop a comment or message me directly to let me know what we can add to this conversation. This is Ron Weiss-Sikarski for the Black Hole of Real Estate.